Mr. Greg Farrell, thank you so much for coming to our studios. I was talking about the book Crash of the Titans to our audience, and this is a special book. It's about the collapse of Merrill Lynch.
Correct.
And also the events of 2007.
Yes, it's a book about the financial crisis, but I want to zero in on Merrill Lynch, which is a legendary American brokerage firm, one of the great success stories of the second half of the 20th century, and how in its drive to be even more profitable than Goldman Sachs, it ended up collapsing in the financial crisis and needed to be sold to Bank of America.
So this is the thesis of the book, but it has a particular importance for our audience, the Turkish audience, because it has a name, a Turkish name in it, and it's Osman Summersea. Can you tell us about his importance to the book, his relevance?
Yes,
in this?
Osman Summersea is a very important figure in the history of Merrill Lynch. He was put in charge of fixed income commodities and currencies in the summer of 2006. And he was a terrific salesman. He had been based in London, doing very well selling fixed income products on the continent.
What was he doing before?
He actually had very interesting origins in Istanbul. He was, like I assume many people did, sold rugs, ran a bus tour company, or at least gave bus tours, very much involved in the tourist trade before he decided, I presume after college, to try his lot in finance. And he was very bright. He's a quick study. And he moved up the ranks at Merrill Lynch. And when he got to London, became a top salesman. He also worked in the Far East for a while, in Japan, and he was a success there. He was so successful, and he generated so much profit through the fixed income division, the European fixed income division, that Stan ONeill, the chief executive officer, took a real liking to him.
So he hired him?
Well, no, Stan, he was hired before, but Stan, as chief executive, then was in a position where he would see dozens of top executives around the world. And Osman Summersea was one of the few people that Stan ONeill thought could become chief executive of Merrill Lynch.
So he had an eye on him,
yes,
this special person who was a rug seller, salesperson, a bus operator, I heard earlier in his life. Interesting, a very successful salesperson. So what happens then?
So he's put in charge. There's a lot of pushback to Stan ONeill because even though Summersea is very good at selling the fixed income products in Europe, running fixed income commodities and currencies, the FIC department out of New York for Merrill Lynch is a huge job, and he did not have much experience. And the fact that Stan was pushing him so hard gave him a lot of leeway. And once he came on board, he knew what his job was. His job was to drive revenues. That's what he was doing before, and that's what fueled his climb. And a lot of people came in with him who were sales-oriented rather than risk-oriented, and a lot of less experienced fixed income people replaced some more experienced fixed income people at precisely the time when the market for collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, was going like this. Merrill Lynch, like Goldman, like Citigroup, like all the Wall Street banks, was making profits hand over fist in 2004, 2005, 2006, selling mortgage-based products, CDOs.
Or the toxic instruments,
before they were known as toxic, exactly. The key is from late 2006 into 2007, the market changed dramatically. And so as a result, you have a bunch of salesmen at Merrill Lynch working for Summersea, basically putting together the funding to create CDOs and sell off parts of it. But now they're not able to sell off the entire CDO. A portion of it. How many people
were, sorry for interrupting, how many people were working for Osman Summersea?
Well, there's a core group of a dozen to a score, 12 to 20, but there's a larger group that report up to them. So he's got a team in place in New York, and they're not able to sell all the CDOs they manufacture. So as a result, portions of each CDO, which at the time were mismarked as AAA, that's through no one's fault, that's the way things were back then, ended up on Merrill Lynch's books. And because manufacturing, generating the CDOs, created revenues and helped everybody's bonus, Merrill Lynch kept making CDOs all the way through the end of 2006 into the first quarter of 2007, so that by the time the market is almost completely dried up, Merrill Lynch cannot sell about $30 billion worth of CDOs that are now sitting on their books. So this turns out to be a devastating problem as 2007 goes from the summer into the fall, and everybody realizes these assets are toxic. Merrill Lynch has to declare a loss of, or write down $8 billion worth of value in October of 2007. Summersea is fired. Stan ONeill is fired. So that is what happened in a nutshell to Merrill Lynch by late 2007.
What happened to Osman Summersea?
He was hired in a senior role at a London hedge fund, the Duet Group, And so he moved a few months after leaving Merrill Lynch to London. I assume he's still in London, but...
Did you ever talk to him?
Well, I made sure, since a good portion of the beginning of the book was about him and what happened in the fixed income department, it was very important to me that I understand what his side of the story was. So I was able, to my satisfaction, to get his side of the story. Very
interesting. When you talked to him, did you feel some kind of guilt or some kind of feelings accumulated, or was he very helpful to you in portraying the whole story over there?
I will say this, that there was a lot of evidence on his side in terms of emails, etc., that show that he was not alone, that shows that there were risk managers and other senior executives who were in the room, or at least should have been aware of this, and that therefore a lot of paperwork on his side could be used to defend him, that he wasn't off doing this by himself.
Interesting. And Mr. Farrell, what made you write this book right now? Why not a year ago, or 2 years, or 5 years?
I did. I wrote it right after the financial crisis.
Financial crisis, so, you just finished.
Right. So basically, this is the paperback version, which has just come out. It came out, there was a whole spate of books in 2010 about the financial crisis, and a lot of them, what I wanted to do, since a number of the financial crisis books seek to explain the entire crisis, what happened from A to Z, I wanted to focus on one story about a bank, Merrill Lynch, that was the most famous bank, the most famous brokerage house in America, and how this bank, which had a rock-solid business in the financial advisory business, could stumble so badly by getting into a business that it didn't really understand. And what we've been talking about, the fixed income business, was a classic example of how the people at Merrill Lynch didn't really understand the risks associated with the CDOs and that entire market.
What should the investors in today's fragile markets take from this book?
Beware of chasing Goldman Sachs, because if a financial firm becomes too interested in its own profits instead of serving the customers and clients that it has, it loses sight. And that's clearly what happened to Merrill Lynch. It became much more interested in its own profitability, in its own bonus pool that goes all the way to the top, than it did in serving its clients. And I think that's it's a lesson that's been it's a lesson that everybody says they know, but when you're in the business, it's still a drive that cannot be removed from the financial business.
That's true. And you launched the book in February?
Yes. No, it came out originally in November 2010.
In November 2010.
And then in September, last September, it came out in paperback. So it's, anyway, I've discovered, because Merrill Lynch is a brand name, a household name throughout the country, that there's been a lot of support in every small or medium-sized city across the country. There are lots of successful Merrill Lynch financial advisors, and their clients are regular Americans who want to invest in the stock market and invest for their kids' college funds. And I thought it would be good that a lot of these financial advisors and their customers would want to know what really happened to Merrill Lynch in New York, which is where it blew up.
That's a good point. And how is the demand for the book nowadays? I know you do lots of book signing.
It's been good. So
it's in Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, everywhere.
Absolutely. And you can download it on your Kindle on the wireless.
You can download in Kindle. This is good to know for our audience too in Turkey. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in,
Malika, thank you
giving
so much
us this interesting story behind the 2007 events. And it's interesting to hear a Turkish name, unfortunately, but it's very good to see the whole picture. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Malika.